Half a day, guys, and we're back with another episode of the One Micronesia podcast. Now, this episode, I am excited because I've learned about this foundation way before I left for Guam in 2012, and really wanted to learn more about it. I just didn't really have the means to do so. But now with what we're doing here on the podcast, where we're doing Zoom, we're doing virtual meetings with pretty much anybody from any corner of the world, I think it was about time that I brought these guys on because what they're doing, back home in the Federated States of Micronesia and pretty much in the Micronesian region is huge when it comes to education for the younger generation. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming our guest for today's episode, Mr. Neil Mellen, who's all the way out at the East Coast. So I'm super happy that I got to get him on with the time difference and everything, but we made it work. So, Neil, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Anytime. So, Neil, we're talking about your foundation. So before we get to the foundation, I kind of want to learn more about you because this all started because you actually took up a service and flew. You left your home, to fly millions of miles across the world to a little island to serve and to do your part. So Neil, let's get to know you a little bit. So where are you from? And let's start from there.
Well, my name is Neil Mellen. I'm originally from California. I went to college in Virginia, and then I joined the Peace Corps, and now I live in South Carolina. And I was a Peace Corps volunteer on the atoll of Ulithi in Yap State from 2002 to 2005, where I was a librarian and a teacher.
So how did it all start? The decision to join the Peace Corps and to fly all the way to Yap. Let's talk about the process.
Sure. So when I was in college, I decided that when I graduate, I wanted to join the Peace Corps. And the way Peace Corps operated at that point, you could choose a region. And if you got that region, then you could choose a country within the region. And if you got that country, then you could slowly sort of narrow it down. And very early on in the process, I went to the library in my college, and I started looking for books about Oceania. And it was a great library at a good university, but there were not a lot of books. But I came across this one book, and I didn't take it from the library, but this is a copy of it, called Japan's Islands of Mystery. And it was written by a guy named Willard Price, who was an American, and very unique in that he got into what was then the Japanese mandate of Micronesia. And he wrote about sort of all these different places he visited, but he spent a lot of time talking about Yap. And I was just enthralled. And I was like, that's where I want to go.
Wait, what was going through your mind? Were you like scared at the time? Were you just like excited? What was the feeling?
No, it was definitely excitement. And then when I got there, I'd say that the first thing that I felt was that this is a very welcoming place. And I say that because I think that some visitors or anthropologists or other folks, they kind of brush, paint with a pretty broad brush, and they'll say, well, Micronesians are kind of reserved. And I think then that sort of gets into this whole stereotype that I think is totally wrong. Because I found just right off the bat, and very much more so over the time that I was there, incredibly supportive, incredibly welcoming. I mean, in the States, you don't see someone invite a stranger into their home and share a meal with them at their table, right? But it would be shocking for you to be in Yap and that not happen to you, right? And the longer I was there, I mean, every day I felt like I was part of the community, whether we're doing village work or going fishing with the boys or working with the men to make a cookhouse or going to mass or whatever it is. I always felt welcome, treated well, and accepted. And there wasn't anyone who wouldn't stop and open up their basket and offer to have a chew and sit down and talk. And that's just not how people tend to think and act in the US.
So, before we go into break right now, Neil, let's talk about Habele. Why the name? And we're going to get to the foundation later, but I just want to let people know that we're talking about the Habele Foundation, such an awesome foundation who gives out scholarship. And I know we're going to talk about how it all went from scholarships to other projects, but why Habele?
Yeah, so Habele is sort of a play on words in Ulithian. It's like the future tense to make something happen, but it's often used in a way that sort of communicates like having a dream, pursuing it, and realizing it, or to make it be would be the slang translation. And so we felt like that was a name that kind of captured, this isn't just the future, but it's we're working together towards something, and we can make something happen, make it be.
Wow. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to get to the foundation and how it all started, how the idea and the work that went into creating such a beautiful and awesome foundation. So we'll be back to talk about that. Habele, guys, and we're back, and we're talking to Neil Mellen, who's all the way out in the East Coast. Neil's a part of an awesome and amazing foundation called Habele Foundation, who do so much for especially our youth and education out here in the Federated States of Micronesia and the Micronesian region. So, Neil, we're back here, and I want to get to the foundation. So tell me about how the idea started, how it all started, pretty much.
Yeah, so Peace Corps gives volunteers a living stipend, and it's like a uniform policy. And the volunteers like myself who are on outer islands where there's not much of a cash economy, you can't spend the money. I mean, it's not that much, but you can't really spend the money because there's not much of a cash economy in the outer islands. So I did what I later learned was really common among the former Peace Corps volunteers while I was a volunteer. And what I did was there was a kid in the village who was very academically promising. And the family, if they had the money, wanted to send the kid to one of the private religious schools in the district center, but they couldn't. And so I said, well, why don't I do that? And, long story short, when I got back to the States, it turns out lots of former Peace Corps volunteers did this when they were volunteers. And some even tried to keep it up when they got back. But over time, especially in the pre-internet days, over time, they'd sort of fall out of communication with the family, or that one kid would graduate. And there was a strong interest in sort of giving scholarships, elementary and high school scholarships for kids to go to places like Xavier, Yap Catholic, the SDA schools, stuff like that. But a lot of the individual volunteers couldn't keep it up after they were gone, not because they lacked the money or whatever. It was sort of the organizational component. So a couple of volunteers and we set up a 501c3 nonprofit and essentially went to other volunteers and said, we'll manage the process if you'll make, small donations towards it. And so in 2006, we incorporated Habele and, kind of made it official.
Wow. And let's talk about, how many scholarships have you guys awarded over the years? They're just a random number. I mean, is there...
So this year we got 22 kids on scholarships, and that's a little bit low, partially because of the COVID situation. Some kids were on one island and the school was in another, and they couldn't travel, or a few schools weren't going to come back, but some of them transferred. But over the years, I pulled the number today, actually, because I didn't know, but there were 87 kids before these current 22. So that's about 112 kids over the years. And that started off the first couple of years where we only have like 1 or 2 kids because it was all based on how much money we made, right? Former Peace Corps, former State Department people who got posted out there, guys who were in the Navy or the Coast Guard, or the kids of people who served in the war out there, the kids of people who were in the TTPI administration, or even tourists who went out there and just, oh, wow, they're enamored by the place. And they would send, $50 here, $100 there, $20 there. And, year to year, we'd say, okay, here's how much money we have. How far down the list of the applicants can we go? Maybe keep a little in reserve so that next year, if we don't pull in quite as much money, we don't have a shock, And so over the years, I feel like we've fine-tuned it. I mean, we would go out there and talk to families and say, okay, how's the kid doing? What's going on? And then, talk to us about our process. Did you feel like you had enough information? What could we do to make it better? And we just kind of kept working out the kinks over the years.
have you guys been in contact with the students who've gotten who awarded these scholarships over the years?
Yeah. So we only serve primary school and high school precisely because we know that if a kid can get out of high school and is ready to get in and succeed at a college,
Mm-hmm.
they can get a, Pell Grant or some other sort of form. And the challenge was always that there were these financial opportunities, but kids sometimes weren't sort of able to get up to the level to be prepared to realize them, right? They'd either, not get off island to get into these programs, or they did and they maybe weren't totally ready to succeed in them. So when you look at the kids who've been in the program, there's some great success stories, and there's some great success stories, I'd say, of kids who not only did they complete their education, but then went back, right? So I know, like, we've got one of the earliest graduates came back and was working for the national government in special ed. And she moved back to YAP and working at the YAP State Department of Education. And that's really exciting. We're not here to tell them, what they should do. We're here to say, look, there's a path and we can help you along at some of these few steps, and we'll make it easier to get to further steps. If you can go back and give back, that's awesome. We sort of don't want to be accused of encouraging brain drain or anything like that, but everyone's got their own agency, and so it is very exciting to see how many kids have gone back or are still, some kids who went on to get a second degree or are still, at reputable colleges, moving up, and a lot of the schools, I think, do at the high school level. A lot of schools that we work with on the scholarships do kind of imbue a sense of, if this works and you get out, come back.
It's always been there, that idea to always go back home and to give back to the community. And I think your organization is one of those organizations that kind of help them on their journey to set them off onto a great path and to, pretty much take off with their education and career, and hopefully, down the line, just come back to the islands and give back. And that's what they're doing. So it's such an awesome thing, an awesome story that I'm hearing about this foundation. Neil, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the current projects that you guys are doing now, the current donations and stuff. So we'll get to that after this break. Habele, guys, and we're back. It's the One Micronesia podcast. My name is Victorious. I'm here with Neil Mellen, one of the founders of the Habele Foundation, who does so much when it comes to our youth, and I talked about it before we went at the break, to pretty much lighting up the path for students back in the FSM and Micronesia to further their education, pretty much with scholarships. But the foundation now, I know you guys started with scholarships, just such a big thing, such a big help. But now you guys are doing so much more. So there's scholarship, and then there's other projects and other donations. So let's talk more about what other things you guys got going on.
Yeah, well, thanks. We do, broadly speaking, we do four things. We do tuition scholarships for kids in elementary and high school. We do book donations. We do robotics, and we help traditional skills mentorships. And there's a lot of overlap, because the way these programs developed and the way that we have found that they work best is when there's a lot of overlap. And so, early on with books, that was sort of obvious. A lot of the former Peace Corps volunteers had a background as librarians. And so we only pursue projects when there's a local request, right? We're not going to sit around, oh, this is something that maybe, no. So we were contacted, pretty early on. I think 2006, the first year we're formally incorporated. And I think that was natural, because all of us had contacts who had seen us as, oh, those were the teachers and the librarians. Could you guys help us gather books? So that's how we got into books. We got into traditional skills because we had kids who were on scholarships, a few who were maybe having a little time after school and kind of get into, a little bit of trouble. And we went out and we talked to them. We talked to their families. We talked to the schools, and we talked to people in the community. And we talked to some carvers and weavers and craftsmen craftswomen. And well, there was a sense that something that was really grounding were passing along the traditional skills. And something that a lot of the craftsmen and women were concerned about was, were these skills going to be sustained? And so we found that there were small things that we could do. So, for example, with carving, I'm not a master canoe carver, like what could I possibly do to help, right? Well, it turns out that there's a piece of the puzzle that is sort of hard to get in Yap or in Chuk or one of the lagoon or outer islands. And that's a really good adze blade, because adze blades for hafted adze, the type of adze that are used in Micronesia and in the region, that's not the traditional style of adze blades that are made and sold in the West. And there aren't really people who make blades like this anymore. And so the carvers were saying, well, we're going to have to change the way we've carved for so long, unless we can find a place to get really good adze blades. And we said, well, that's a really niche thing that maybe we can do to help. Will you, work to include young kids who maybe have a Habele scholarship and need to stay out of trouble after school, or others, and kind of work it into a mentorship? Well, of course, that's the model that they operate on anyway. And so that's a kind of an example of, there's a small little missing link in this chain of things that are happening, where we might be able to provide something small but have an impact on a larger system. And so we started, working with metalsmiths and getting blades. And in fact, right now we're working on a custom design blade where we did all these surveys of carvers and, passed out a big survey and sat down with folks and looked at what they were using. And we've got a metalsmith who sort of specializes in traditional hand tools. And he worked with our carvers and made a design. Now carvers have it, they're testing it, we're going to refine it, and then we're going to send it out along the lines of some of our former donations to, men's houses and different carving groups. So traditional skills is one. And traditional skills is actually extended to include some Micronesians in the States. So in the case of the weaving program, we had been supporting weavers, and there's a continuum of islands between Yap and Chuk where they weave skirts. And what we found is originally it was a Habele student who came over, and somebody was sort of asking her, like, when's the last time you were weaving? I was like, well, when I came, I couldn't bring my loom, like I'm a kid, going off to college. I got one suitcase, okay, well, how are you going to weave? How are you going to teach your daughter to weave? Yeah, And so in that case, what we did is we worked with folks in Yap and the outer islands of Yap, and we came up with a sort of simple design for a loom that you could go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy the pieces, and with these instructions, build a loom. And so islanders in the mainland could create looms and sustain the tradition. And it was also a vehicle for improving the connections back home, because you'd have a weaver often back, in the islands who could be doing videos and other stuff to facilitate that transfer of knowledge. Yeah, but the traditional skills is sort of an example of how we kind of pursued one thing and then naturally started moving to other projects. So obviously the scholarships, and then the traditional skills, the book donations complement that. Is a project that we've been piloting for a couple months now in Yap. It's called Young Island Readers. And so one of the things that we were anxious about, based on a lot of conversations with folks who work at Head Start centers and elementary school, was when kids come to school, when they get to kindergarten and first grade, do they already love to learn in terms of reading? And one of the things that we found in looking at kind of like the academic literature on this was that the number of books that a kid has in their house up to age 5 is the best determinant of how they're going to do in reading and how much they like reading their whole life. And so, when we came across this, we've been talking to especially the Head Start, early Head Start, some of these other young child educators. The big problem was not a ton of Micronesians have books in their home. So we said, well, what could we do? And so, talking with folks at the Department of Ed, early Head Start stuff, we realized that, okay, there is a way we can do this. And we learned about the Dolly Parton Foundation, and they have a program that started off in the States and now is in a lot of places where a kid can get a book mailed directly to them every month from birth to 5. So we went to them and we're like, can we do this in Micronesia? And it's a micro what, right? Like, so we've all been through that. Okay, so a lot of phone calls later, yeah, like we've never done this before, but we'll try it. So we've kicked it off in Yap, and it's called Young Island Readers. So if you give birth at the hospital in Yap, someone's going to sit down and say, would you like a book a month for the next 5 years for this beautiful little new child? And they sign up, and then and we got Yap Catholic high school kids are helping with the sign up. The wonderful people at Yap Hospital, and they have so much to deal with right now. They were so eager to do this. And so every month, books get mailed out to every kid on that list. And so by the time those kids are 5 years old, they'll have 60 books in their house, their books, right? And especially for little kids, it's just about the kid having this thing and playing with it and pretending to read and just acculturating to it. And so we're trying it out. A lot of our programs, we sort of field test in Yap, and if it's scalable, we sort of migrate to the East. Just like we did with robotics. High school robotics started with 2 schools on Yap. And today it's in 4 states, all 4 states of the FSM. I think we have 23 high schools across the FSM now who are participating. And so our model has been to kind of, try stuff out, work the kinks out in Yap. Like same with the scholarships, slowly scale it and move it to the East. So we have coverage across the FSM. We do the same thing with book donations. So now all 4 states. And we're trying that. We're gonna try that model with Young Island Readers.
Wow, such amazing projects, such amazing donations to help with further along education. Man, Neil, we're gonna take a quick break, and we'll be right back to pretty much sum everything up and close out. So, guys, we'll be right back. Hafide, guys, and we're back. We're still here. We're talking with Neil Mellen, one of the members of the amazing Habele Foundation, who is doing so much for the younger generation and the education system back home in Yap and throughout the FSM in regards to scholarships, to projects, to donations. We talked about a whole lot of that. But Neil, I gotta say, man, before we close out here, we talked about how people can reach out to you guys for donations in many ways. So how can people reach out to you guys for monetary donations, for book donations, or pretty much donations in general?
Yeah, so habele.org, habele.org. Like we talked about, sending books is really simple. If you pack the box and you send us the specs, we will do all the work and in terms of the postage and matching it with the school and sending you what you need to just slap it on. But, some people would prefer financial donations that will pay for the postage for other people's books. It's going to pay for the scholarships and some of the traditional programs. So at habele.org, at the website, there's a snail mail address. You can send a check, or of course, there's a PayPal option for online donations. And we're a 501c3 nonprofit. So for some folks, there's a tax deduction available.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Neil, it was such a fun talk. And, honestly, I knew about the foundation. I just didn't know exactly how it all started, what you guys are, what projects you guys got going on, so this is really a whole educational thing for me as well, to learning about the foundation, get into depth of what the foundation is all about. So it's been such an awesome talk, Neil. And again, I want to thank you for coming on and to sharing about the foundation. Before we close out, any last words you want to throw out there for the people listening or watching?
Well, I just say that I think I'm like a lot of Peace Corps in that I'd say, I was there, I was teaching, I was trying to make, some impact of some sort. But truth be told, the impact, the positive impact and the kindness and the acceptance that I received was far greater than any impact that I felt like I could have been attempting to have. In my experiences, that's how a lot of former Peace Corps volunteers feel. And so for us, Habele is kind of a way to have some of that engagement, that attempt to try to, do something good over the long term, but in really minor ways, trying to find small ways in which maybe we can help in kind of a unique niche way. And I think that for all of us, former Peace Corps volunteers involved with Habele, that I think we kind of see we try to see this as like a link in a larger chain, in that even predating the war in the Pacific, there's a history, there's a background, a context of people to people relationships between the U.S. and Micronesia that is, truth be told, the real foundation historically and otherwise of that larger sort of political strategic relationship. Like in my own case, that's like, I have a great uncle who was in the war and was in Ulithi right where I was, right? And so I think that most of us former Peace Corps volunteers, we kind of see this larger line of relationships, of connections, and we want to find small ways we can do something positive. And along those lines, I just want to thank you, because this podcast is a very important thing. The way in which you tell stories and facilitate the telling of stories of islanders who have very important stories, I think that's incredible. And I think that this is a gem, or if you're watching for the first time, that you've really stumbled on. And if you're watching for the 100th time, you're well aware of. And so I just want to thank you for having this medium. I mean, never mind what the former Peace Corps says, getting these islanders on to tell these incredibly important, compelling stories that cannot be overlooked. So thanks.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. And like I said, it's not just one person, or, it's everybody. I think it's a collective thing that we all have to come together to try to make something beautiful come out of it. And like I said, like what your foundation is doing is such furthering the education back in the islands. And like we talked about my experience, so like I never knew how to make a robot. Kids back home, they're making robots. By the time they're out to college, they can make their own, their own iRobot pretty much. So it's crazy to see how that's how the education has pretty much upped its game in Micronesia, and it's all thanks to your foundation and other foundations like yours who have really made donations and sent in the help that is needed, and it's really paying off. That's for sure. So, Neil, thank you so much for the talk. It's been awesome. And like I said, keep in touch, and I'd love to, do more projects with you. If you guys have any information you want to send my way, I'd always love to share the information. So let me know. All right, guys, that pretty much does it for another episode of the One Micronesia podcast. Such an awesome talk. We'll see you guys at the next one. Peace.